Hey, what's going on everybody? And today I'm going to show you how to use Flappy Bird. Very useful skill. Today I'm going to show you how to create Flappy Bird using Swift 2.1 in Xcode. Now this first part is going to be focusing on how to set up all your characters and also set up the physics body of your characters as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so let's go ahead, open up Xcode and create a new Xcode project. This will be a game as we are creating a game, Flappy Bird. So go ahead, click next. Our product name, I'm just going to call this my Flappy clone. You can of course call that whatever you want. Language will be Swift, game technology will be SpriteKit, and the devices will be universal. Now go ahead, click next, and create. And now that we have that created, let's go ahead and actually go over here to my files, these Flappy Bird objects. You will see them right here. They have my ghost, my ground, and my wall. Now you can of course create your own objects, but in order to do this tutorial properly, there's a few sizing things that you need to do. So in order to do this and have the exact same code as I'm using, be sure to use a 200 by 200 pixel image for your ghost. Your ground here is going to be a 1080 by 100 image. And lastly, you have a 1000 by 100 image for your wall, or the pipes. So now that we have all those straightened out, let's go ahead, go over to our assets.xc assets, and we're just going to click and drag all our file images right over to the assets.xc assets. And I forgot to mention, these will be in the link description down below if you want to download these images. So now that we have those imported, let's go ahead, go over to our game scene.swift, and right in here, we're just going to delete everything that we see in our did move to view and everything that you see inside of our touches began, like so. Now the first thing I want to do is actually create my ground. So let's go ahead, go right above our did move to view, and I'm just going to say var ground will be equal to an SKSprite node, open close parentheses. Now before we continue on, I'm actually going to make this window a bit bigger so it's a little bit easier for you guys. So now we can go down here to our did move to view, and I'm going to say ground equals an SKSprite node, open parentheses, and this is going to be an image named, and this of course will be our ground image that we put in here. So it'll be the exact same name that you put inside of your assets.xc assets. As you can see right here, we have ground. So now that we have all that figured out, let's head back to our game scene.swift and let's start editing the size of our ground. So we're going to say ground.setScale, and we're going to set the scale equal to 0.5. And of course this would be different if you had a different sized image, but if you have a 1080 by 100 image, this is what your scale size will be. Now we want to edit the position of our ground. So I'm going to say the ground.position will be equal to, and I'm going to set this equal to a CG point, open parentheses, and our x value will be equal to our self.frame.width divided by 2, as we want that to be right in the middle of our scene. And then our y value will actually be 0, as in SpriteKit, 0 is actually at the bottom of the scene. So we want the ground to be, of course, at the bottom of the scene, so we're putting that as 0. And then we also want it to be slightly above, because what it does here is it has the ground, but it takes the center of the ground, so it's cutting off half of your ground from the bottom of the screen. So what we actually need to do here is add a few more pixels, otherwise it's going to be cut off at the bottom of the ground. So we're going to say 0 plus our ground.frame.height divided by 2. And that'll make it just so that it's right above the scene. And then lastly, just so that we can see our ground on the image, we just need to say self.addChild and then ground. So this is the last thing we're going to do right now as to adding the ground onto the scene. So let's go ahead and build and run this. So now as you can see, the ground here is right down there at the bottom of our scene, so that has worked perfectly. So the next thing we're going to do is actually add the ghost. So let's head back over to our project, go right above our did move to view, and we're going to say var ghost will be equal to an SKSprite node, open close parentheses. And then we just need to go right down here, and we're going to say ghost will be equal to an SKSprite node, open parentheses. This will be an image named, open close quotation marks, and right inside of this we're going to type in ghost. Big surprise. It's essentially the same name that we have inside of our assets.xc assets right there. So let's head back over to our game scene.swift, and now we're going to set the size of our ghost. So our ghost, we're actually going to set this size manually. So we're going to say ghost.size will be equal to a CG size, open parentheses, with a width of 60 and a height of 70 pixels. So that is going to be the size of our ghost. You can of course change that if you want a bigger ghost or a smaller ghost. Do whatever you want. And now we're going to set the position of our ghost. So I'm going to say ghost.position will be equal to a CG point. There we go. Open parentheses. The x value of this will be our self.frame.width divided by 2, but we also want it to be slightly to the left. So the way I'm going to do this is actually subtract by our ghost.frame.width. That way it's just slightly over to the left, but you can of course do that however you want. And then lastly, our Y value will be just in the center of our scene, so we're going to say self.frame.height divided by 2. So we're setting it right in the center of our scene. And then yeah, that's pretty much it for our ghost right now. We'll add some physics to it in just a moment, but right now we're going to say self.addChild, and we're going to type in ghost. So now if we were to build and run this, we should see the ghost on our scene. So there you have our ghost. Now I know I'm going to get a bunch of questions in the comment section, so right now I'm going to address this. So if you go to the image named and let's say you type it in wrong, let's go ahead and build and run this and see what that does. So if you type it in wrong, you will get this box with an X. So that means that they can't find that image that you're trying to search for. So that box with the red X means there's something there, but we don't have the image for it. So Apple has replaced that with a box with a red X. So be sure to type in your things properly or else it won't work properly. So let's go over to our project and I'm just going to create a function. So just type in func create walls. You can of course call that whatever you want, but that's what I'm calling it. Then go open curly bracket, close curly bracket. Now essentially we want the create walls inside of a function. That way we can actually call it via a timer. That way you can get the walls coming in at random positions and at this certain time. Now to actually create the walls, let's go ahead and just say let wall pair equal, and we're going to make this an SK node. Now essentially what this is, you can of course hit option and you'll get a little question mark and you can read more about it, what it does and whatnot. But basically what we're going to do with this wall pair SK node, we're going to add our top wall and our bottom wall into that wall pair, and then we're going to edit the position of the wall pair itself. So let's go ahead and create our top wall and our bottom wall. So we're going to say let top wall equal an SK sprite node, and then open parentheses, this will be an image named, and this will be our wall. And if you head back over to your assets.exe assets, you will see that that is the correct name. Whoops. So let's head back over to our gamescene.swift, and now we can also create our bottom wall. So we can actually pretty much just copy and paste that and just change the name, like so. So right now we're going to set the position of our top wall and our bottom wall. So I'm going to say the top wall dot position will be equal to a CG point, open parentheses, our X value, I'm just going to set this equal to myself.frame.width. And then I'm going to put this right in the center, so divided by 2. Now this X value is actually temporary as I want it to be over on the right side of the screen. Right now this is just going to put it in the center of the scene. That way we can actually see what's going on. And we're going to go right into our Y value, and we're going to set this equal to our self.frame.height divided by 2. That way it's again in the center of our scene. We will edit both of those values in just a minute. Now we can do the exact same thing with our bottom wall. So bottom wall dot position equals CG point, open parentheses, our X value will be equal to our self.frame.width divided by 2, and our Y value will be equal to our self.frame.height divided by 2, like so. And now also with our top wall and our bottom wall, I want to change the sizing of it. So I'm going to go right down here and say top wall dot set scale, and we're going to set the scale equal to 0.5 again. And our bottom wall dot set scale, we're going to set this again to 0.5. And now, like I mentioned earlier, we want to add both of those walls into our wall pair. So we're going to go do that right now, and we're going to say wall pair dot add child, and we're going to add the child of our top wall. And then we're going to do the same with our bottom wall. So wall pair dot add child, this will be our bottom wall. So now we have both of our walls inside of that wall pair. Now we're going to add that wall pair actually onto our scene. So I'm going to say self.addChild, and this will be my wall pair. So let's go ahead, build and run this. Oh, I never changed back that ghost. So let's head back over to our project and edit that name real quick so that we can get back our image. And we are actually not getting any pipes because we actually need to head back over to our project, go over to our did move to view, and we actually need to call this function so it's actually building onto the scene. So we need to say create walls. Now, if we were to build around this, as you can see, we have our pipe set up like so. Now, as you can see, the two pipes are overlapping, so we want to make them not overlap. So how do we do this? Let's head back over to our project, and I'm just going to go over here to the top wall dot position and the bottom wall dot position. Like I said, we're going to edit these. So the self.frame.height is the main one that we're going to edit right now. And what we need to do right here is actually make the top wall go up a little bit. So we're going to say plus 400. We'll see if that works in just a second. And then with the bottom wall, we want it to go down a little bit. So I'm going to say minus 400. So that way it goes up 400 pixels and the other one's down 400 pixels, and you might get a gap. So let's go ahead and build around this. And as you can see, we have a gap. Now that gap's a little bit too big for my liking, so I'm gonna go ahead and switch this to 350. And then this will be minus 350 like so. So if we were to build and run this, that's the kind of gap I like, and you can of course edit that to your heart's desire. So now let's actually head back over to our project and add physics to everything. So what we need to do here is actually go right above our game scene, the class game scene right here, and we're going to create a struct. Now essentially what a structure does, it holds a bunch of properties and methods as you can see here, but it holds them under a certain name. So this makes it a lot easier when you're trying to name your physics bodies and give them certain properties, that way they can collide with one another. So inside of our structure, the name of this, I'm just going to call this my physics category. You can of course call that whatever you want. Properties and methods, what we need to do in here is create a static let, and then this will be our ghost variable. Now we want this ghost variable to be a uint32. Now you can read this in the description right here. It's a 32-bit unsigned integer value type. I'm not going to go really too much into it. You can of course read up more on that yourself, but essentially what we're doing here, we're assigning a certain bit number to our ghost, our ground, and our walls. So we're going to set the ghost bit number equal to a 0x1, and then we're going to go less than, and set that to 1. Like so. And we can do this with all of our variables, so I'm going to just copy and paste all of those 3 times, and then we're going to have a static let ground, and we're going to set this equal to 0x1, but this time will be equal to 2. And lastly, this one will be our wall. So I'm going to set our wall equal to 3. Like so. So now that we have all these physics categories created, let's go ahead and put all these onto our characters. So we're going to go right down here to our ground, and I'm going to say ground.physicsBody will be equal to an skPhysicsBody, open parentheses, and we're going to give this a rectangle of size, and we're going to give it the same size as our ground. So we're going to say ground.size, like so. And now with this physics body that we have just created, we need to go to the ground.physicsBody.category bitmask, and we're going to apply this number that we just created up here to our ground. That way we can actually tell whether we're colliding and whatnot. So we're going to set this equal to our physics category.ground, like so. Then we also need to go down here and say ground.physicsBody.collision bitmask, and this time we actually want to test what we're colliding with. Now we don't want our ground to collide with the wall, so all we need to collide with is the physics category.ghost, like so. And then also with this, we're going to say ground.physicsBody.contact test bitmask will be equal to our physics category.ghost as well. Now I will go over the contact test bitmask in part 2 of this, but I'll go quickly over what all these mean. So the collision bitmask is basically when 2 objects collide, we just want them to collide. That's it. Now the contact test bitmask is a little bit different. It tests whether they have collided, and then in a future function that we'll add into the game later on, we're going to do some things to the objects that have collided. So hopefully that made sense. I'm trying to explain this in the best way possible. Physics is hard. And then also with our ground, we want to say ground.physicsBody.affected by gravity. We're going to set this equal to false. We don't want our ground moving on us. And then we also want our ground.physicsBody.dynamic be equal to false. Now essentially what dynamic means is if it's set to false, that means it's an unmoving character. When it gets hit by something, it's not going to move. But if it was dynamic, it would move if it was hit. So that's pretty much it for our ground physics body. So let's go ahead and edit our ghost physics body. So for our ghost physics body, I'm just going to say ghost.physicsBody will be equal to an skPhysicsBody, and then open parentheses. And this time, this is just a personal preference. You can set it to a rectangle of size if you want, especially if you're using a rectangular character. But I'm going to use a circle of radius. So the circle of radius, I'm going to set this equal to my ghost.frame.height divided by 2. And I just like the way the circle of radius works, especially with this character, as it's a ghost, it has a round head. We don't want it hitting things that's not there. Now also with this physics body, we need to do the exact same thing as we did with the ground. We need to add a category bitmask, collision, and test bitmask. So we're going to go down here and say ghost.physicsBody.category bitmask, and we're going to set this equal to our physics category.ghost. Now with our ghost.physicsBody.collision bitmask, we want this to collide with both the ground and the walls. So we're going to set this equal to our physics category.ground. And also just a straight line up and down like that. It'll be right above your return key if you don't find it. This basically means the physics category.ground and the physics category.wall. So we're going to collide with both of those physics categories. Now we're also going to do the exact same thing for a ghost.physicsbody.contact_test bitmask. And we're going to set this equal again to the exact same thing. So I pretty much just can copy and paste that, but you can type it all in, like so. And then lastly, we want our ghost.physicsbody.affectedbygravity equal to true. Pretty self-explanatory. We want it to be affected by gravity. Then lastly, we're going to say ghost.physicsbody.dynamic, and we're going to set this equal to true. We want this thing to be affected by the wall or ground, so we're going to set this equal to true. Now that is pretty much it for our ghost and our ground. So if we were to build and run this right now, you'll notice that the ghost is going to fall down and hit the ground. As you can see, it's already at the bottom of the screen as soon as it loads up, but you get the point. Now, as you can see, I can click the screen right now, but nothing happens. So let's actually make our ghost jump. So let's go down here to our touches began, and this is actually very simple now that we are using the physics body. So I'm going to say ghost.physicsbody.velocity, and we're going to set this equal to a CG vector make. And our dx value, we want this to be 0. And our dy value, we want this to be 0. We don't want the velocity of this to move at all. And then we want to change this up, and we're going to say ghost.physicsbody.apply impulse, and we're going to apply the impulse of a CG vector make again. And the CG vector make, we don't want it to move it by an x value, so we're going to set that equal to 0. But our y value, we want it to move up by 60 pixels as an impulse. So it's going to give it a force of 60. And this is also because we are using physics, we actually need to change this according to the size of our ghost. So be sure to keep that in mind if you aren't jumping high enough and whatnot. So basically what we're doing, we press the screen, it's automatically going to set the velocity to 0, so it's not moving anymore, and we're applying the impulse so that it jumps up. Build and run. You can click on the screen, and as you will see, you can jump. Now, I don't like this jump. It is not tough enough for Flappy Bird, so I'm going to just make this equal to, let's say, 90. Build and run. That looks pretty good. You can, of course, make this a bit harder if you want, but looking at the hole size and how much you're jumping, that looks good. Now before we continue on here, I actually want to fix this top wall. The green part is supposed to be showing at the bottom of that. So let's head back over to our project, and I'm going to go over to my create walls, go over here, and I'm going to say top wall.z rotation. I'm going to set this equal to a CG float value, and then open parentheses, and we're going to give this the value of m_pi. We're working with radians here, so 180 degrees essentially. So let's go ahead, build, and run this. And now as you can see, my wall is upside down, and that's exactly the way I want it. Now another thing you will notice is right down here, there's not exactly an order to how these things are being created. Sometimes the wall is above the ground, or sometimes the ground is above the wall. So let's head back over to our project and fix this problem. So let's go over to our wall pair, and I'm going to say wall pair.z position. I'm going to set this equal to 1. This is going to be the very back of our scene. So now let's go over here to our ghost, and I'm going to say the ghost.z position will be equal to 2. And then lastly, we want our ground. So I'm going to say ground.z position equals 3. That way this is above everything, and that's how we want it. So now if we were to build and run this, you will notice that every time this wall is going to be now behind the ground instead of in front of it. And lastly, we're going to set up the collision with our walls. So let's head back over to our project, go over to our top wall and our bottom wall. We're going to say top wall.physics body will be equal to an SK physics body. And then open parentheses, we're going to give this a rectangle of size. And this, of course, will be equal to our top wall.size. Now, continuing on with the top wall, we want to pretty much do the same thing as we've done in the past. We want to say the top wall.physicsbody.category bitmask will be equal to our physics category.wall, like so. And then also with this wall, we want our top wall.physicsbody.collision bitmask equal to our physics category.ghost. We only want our wall to collide with the ghost, as I've talked in the past. And then lastly, we would need our top wall.physicsbody.contact test bitmask, and we're going to set this equal to our physics category ghost as well. And then lastly, we want our top wall.physicsbody.dynamic equal to false. That way it's not affected by other things and won't start moving crazily. And then we want our top wall.physicsbody.affected by gravity equal to false as well. And now we can pretty much do this exact same thing with our bottom wall, so let's just copy and paste that. And we're just going to change all of this to our bottom wall. Even this part right here, don't forget that. Now if we were to build and run this, you will see that we have actually added some physics onto our wall, and it's actually affecting the ghost a little bit right now, and that's perfect. Now the movement of the walls and the spawning of the walls we will work in part 2 of this series, but right now let's go ahead and move these walls off to the side, and this will be the end of part 2. So let's go over here, go over to our top wall and our bottom wall position. We're going to set our x value to our self.frame.width, and that's it. We're not going to say divided by 2. Now if we were to build and run this, you will see that this is going to place it right off the side of our scene, like so. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this tutorial, be sure to hit that like button down below. And if you want to see more tutorials like this from me in the future, be sure to subscribe. Be sure to subscribe for part 2 as well, as that will be coming up soon. If you have any questions, be sure to leave that down in the comment section down below, and I'll be sure to address that either in part 2 or in the comment section. Again, thank you all so much for your support, and I will see you in the next one.